It was a bright Tuesday morning at Lincoln Elementary, the kind of morning that usually smelled of chalk dust and fresh notebooks. Inside Mrs. Turner's fifth-grade classroom, the students were buzzing with excitement. It was Family Introduction Day, a little activity where each child stood up and shared something interesting about their parents. One by one, kids went to the front of the room, proudly telling stories about doctors, shop owners, nurses, and mechanics. Laughter filled the air. It was a normal, happy classroom. Then it was her turn. Maya, a quiet, sweet 10-year-old girl sitting in the back row, nervously clutched the edge of her desk. Her brown eyes darted between the teacher and her classmates. She wasn't the loudest in class, but everyone knew she had a gentle heart and a shy smile. Mrs. Turner looked up. "Well, Maya, it's your turn. Tell us something interesting about your parents." Maya stood slowly, brushing down her neatly ironed uniform. Her voice trembled slightly, but she smiled. "My dad," she said softly, "is Chuck Norris." The room went silent. For a second, there was total stillness. You could hear the ticking of the classroom clock. Then Mrs. Turner let out a small laugh. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" Maya repeated quietly. "My dad is Chuck Norris." The teacher blinked, then laughed again, louder this time. "Oh, Maya, you mean the Chuck Norris? The movie star?" Maya nodded. "Yes, ma'am." The classroom burst into giggles. A few kids even whispered to each other. One boy muttered, "Yeah, right, and my mom's Wonder Woman." Mrs. Turner chuckled along with the students. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "we all love Chuck Norris movies, but let's try to be realistic, okay? It's not good to make up stories." The laughter grew louder. Maya's small smile faded. She looked down at her shoes, her hands fidgeting nervously. "But I'm not lying," she whispered. Her voice was so soft that most of the class didn't even hear her, but Mrs. Turner did. She sighed, shaking her head. "All right, Maya, have a seat. Let's hear from someone else, okay?" Maya quietly sat down, staring at her desk. She could feel dozens of eyes staring at her, some mocking, some pitying. The laughter still echoed in her ears. She wanted to explain, to say that her dad really was Chuck Norris, that he told her bedtime stories about courage and kindness, that he visited her school plays when no one noticed. But the words wouldn't come out instead. She just whispered to herself, "He really is my dad." Across the room, Mrs. Turner shook her head slightly, a condescending smile still on her face. Under her breath, she muttered, "Kids and their wild imaginations," but Maya heard it. She took a slow breath, eyes glistening but defiant. She knew the truth, and deep down, she also knew her dad would never let someone laugh at her like this if he were here. The bell rang and students began packing their bags, still giggling about the Chuck Norris story. Mrs. Turner smiled politely as Maya walked past her. "Let's tell real stories next time, okay?" she said softly. Maya didn't reply. She just walked out of the room, holding her backpack tightly. As she stepped into the hallway, she whispered under her breath, "You'll see, Mrs. Turner, you'll see." The camera, or narrator tone, slows here, ending on a dramatic pause, but what happened the next day would leave the entire school speechless. The next morning, Lincoln Elementary buzzed with its usual morning chatter, sneakers squeaking against the hallway floors, lockers slamming and laughter bouncing off the walls. But one girl walked in quietly, her head slightly down, clutching her backpack straps like they were her armor. Maya didn't say a word as she entered Mrs. Turner's classroom. She could already feel the whispers. "Hey, Chuck Norris's daughter is here," one boy joked. Another girl giggled. "Did he drop you off in a helicopter today?" Maya ignored them. She'd cried the night before, not because she was embarrassed, but because she wished her classmates could see her dad the way she did. Not as a legend or a meme, but as a father who cared. Mrs. Turner glanced up as Maya took her seat. The teacher smiled tightly, pretending nothing had happened yesterday. "Good morning, class," she said cheerfully. "Let's have a wonderful day of learning." The lesson began, but halfway through, something strange happened. A deep rumble echoed outside the classroom. At first, everyone thought it was thunder. Then came the sound of a motorcycle engine. Loud, powerful, unmistakable. Students turned toward the windows. Outside, in the school parking lot, a large black motorcycle pulled in. The man who stepped off was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a denim jacket and boots. His face was calm but serious, the kind of expression that didn't need to say much to command attention. Gasps filled the room. Wait. Is that? No way. It can't be. Mrs. Turner squinted through the blinds. The man removed his sunglasses. Her jaw dropped. Before anyone could speak, the classroom door opened. Standing there, larger than life, was Chuck Norris himself. For a moment, no one moved. The only sound was the faint creak of the door closing behind him. Mrs. Turner froze mid-sentence, her face turning pale. The students stared wide-eyed. Maya looked up, and for the first time that day, she smiled. Chuck Norris looked straight at Mrs. Turner, then at the class. His voice was calm, steady, and filled with quiet authority. "Good morning," he said. "I heard someone in here doesn't believe I exist." The classroom erupted in nervous laughter, the kind that comes from shock and disbelief. Mrs. Turner stammered, "Mr. N. Norris." I thought," he raised a hand gently. "It's okay. Kids have wild imaginations, but sometimes they're just telling the truth." He looked down at Maya. "Hi, sweetheart." Maya stood, her eyes bright. "Hi, Dad." The room went dead silent again. Chuck walked over, knelt beside her desk, and gave her a warm smile. "You okay?" She nodded. "Yika." He stood up and turned toward the class. "I heard some of you laughed at my daughter yesterday." No one dared to speak. Chuck's tone wasn't angry. It was calm, but powerful. You see, being strong doesn't mean being the loudest or making others feel small. It means standing up for what's right, even when you're standing alone. He looked around the room. I taught Maya that, and it seems she remembered. The student's eyes widened, every word hit deep. Then Chuck turned to Mrs. Turner. "I understand you're the teacher?" She nodded, her voice trembling slightly. "Yes, sir." I didn't realize." He gave a small smile. "It's all right. We all make mistakes. But kids remember how we treat them, especially when no one else stands up for them." There was a long silence. The room was filled with a mix of respect, awe, and a bit of guilt. Then, like the perfect movie moment, Chuck put his sunglasses back on. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I promised Maya we'd get ice cream after class." He winked at the students. "Remember, kindness is tougher than any punch." He walked out slowly, the sound of his boots echoing down the hallway. As the door closed behind him, the classroom burst into whispers. Was that really Chuck Norris? Oh my gosh, he actually came here. Maya wasn't lying. Mrs. Turner looked at Maya, her eyes soft. "Maya, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have laughed." Maya gave a small smile. "It's okay, ma'am." The bell rang, ending the class. But that moment, that unforgettable morning, became the talk of the entire school. By lunchtime, everyone knew the story. The girl who said her dad was Chuck Norris, and the day he walked right into class. Before we continue, tell me in the comments, from which country and city are you watching this story? I love seeing where our amazing viewers come from. The next few days at Lincoln Elementary felt different. For years, it had been just another school in a quiet town, where gossip traveled faster than kindness. But now, whispers of Chuck Norris came here floated through every hallway like wildfire. Students who had laughed at Maya before were suddenly treating her like a celebrity. "Hey, Maya, is your dad really the Chuck Norris? Can you ask him to sign my notebook? Is it true he fought 10 guys at once?" At first, Maya didn't know how to react. She wasn't used to being noticed, especially not for something that had once made her feel small. But she remembered her dad's words. Kindness is tougher than any punch. So instead of showing off, she smiled and said, "He's just my dad. But sure, I can ask him to sign something." Even Mrs. Turner seemed different. Gone was the teacher who used sarcasm to hide her embarrassment. She greeted Maya warmly every morning, helped her with her essays, and even used the incident as a lesson in class. One day, she stood in front of the board and said softly, "Sometimes we judge people too quickly. Sometimes we forget that every student sitting in this room has a story, and it deserves respect." The class went silent. No one looked away. Even the loudest kids in the back listened. Maya sat there quietly, her heart full. She wasn't used to being the example, but this time it didn't feel bad, it felt meaningful. That night, when Maya got home, Chuck was waiting at the kitchen table.
He had a plate of cookies in front of him, Homemade, slightly burned, but filled with effort. Made these myself, he said, grinning.
Don't tell your mom they're edible weapons, Maya laughed. Dad, everyone at school knows about you now. Chuck leaned back in his chair. And how does that feel? She thought for a moment. Strange, but good. Not because you're famous, but because people finally listened. He nodded, his eyes soft. That's the real power. Not making people fear you, but making them think. There was a quiet pause between them. Then Chuck smiled. Tomorrow I want you to do something. What? Find that teacher. Tell her thank you. Thank her? For what? For learning something new. The next morning, Maya walked into class early. Mrs. Turner was at her desk, grading papers. Good morning, Maya said. The teacher looked up and smiled. Morning, Maya. I just wanted to say, thank you. Mrs. Turner looked surprised. For what? For listening. For changing, my dad said. It's hard to do that. The teacher's eyes softened. She reached across her desk and squeezed Maya's hand. Your dad is a wise man, Maya. You're lucky to have him. But you know what? I think he's lucky to have you, too. That moment, quiet, honest, human, said more than any apology could. Later that day, the principal called an assembly. Hundreds of students filled the gymnasium. On the big screen behind him was a single quote written in bold letters. Don't laugh at someone's story until you know what they've been through, the crowd murmured. Everyone knew what it was about. The principal cleared his throat. We all saw what happened this week, and we all learned something powerful. From a student who showed more grace than most adults ever do. Maya, would you like to say something? Gasps filled the room. Maya froze for a second, then nodded slowly and walked up to the stage. The microphone felt heavy in her hand. Hundreds of eyes were watching. She took a deep breath. I just want to say, everyone deserves respect. You don't have to know someone's family to be kind to them. You just have to try. The crowd was silent. Then applause erupted, echoing through the gym. Somewhere in the back, Chuck Norris stood quietly, wearing his usual denim jacket, a proud smile on his face. He didn't need to be on stage. His daughter had already taken his place. When Maya stepped off, he met her halfway and put an arm around her. You were amazing, he said. So were you, she replied. He laughed. I didn't even do anything. You showed up, Maya said softly. That was enough. That evening, someone posted a video from that assembly online. Within hours, it spread like wildfire. Headlines appeared everywhere. Teacher learns powerful lesson after laughing at student. Then her dad walks in. Chuck Norris teaches respect without throwing a single punch. Little girl. Big heart. The story that melted the internet. Millions watched. Comments poured in from every country imaginable. From the Philippines to Canada. From Kenya to Brazil. People wrote messages of respect and inspiration. Before this video ends, tell us in the comments, have you ever been judged unfairly? Or have you ever stood up for someone who was? Share your story below. And don't forget to tell us where in the world you're watching from. In the end, it wasn't just a story about Chuck Norris. It was about a little girl who taught an entire world something simple, but unforgettable. Strength isn't about fighting back. It's about standing tall and with kindness. Within just a few days, the story of the girl who said her dad was Chuck Norris had taken over the internet. Clips from the school assembly flooded TikTok, YouTube, and news sites around the world. One post had over 50 million views with the caption, "This little girl and her dad just gave the world a masterclass in respect." But while the world was talking, Maya and Chuck were just trying to live a normal life. At home, Chuck was still the same dad, still overcooked pancakes on Sunday, still helped her with homework, still teased her about staying up past bedtime. One night, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Maya looked up and said, "Dad, everyone keeps calling me Chuck Norris's daughter." Chuck smiled softly. "And how does that make you feel?" She hesitated. "I don't want people to like me because of you. I want them to like me because of me." He looked out at the horizon for a long moment before answering. "Maya, the world doesn't remember people just because of their name. They remember them for their actions. What you did, standing tall, staying kind, that's what they'll remember." Maya leaned her head on his arm. "You really think so?" Chuck nodded. I don't think so, sweetheart. I know so. A week later, something unexpected happened. Lincoln Elementary received an official letter from the Department of Education. It congratulated the school for promoting values of respect, equality, and kindness. The principal called it a national example of positive change. Mrs. Turner, who had once laughed at Maya's words, stood in the hallway reading that letter with tears in her eyes. She found Maya after class and said, "You know, I used to think teaching meant knowing everything, but this week I realized it also means learning, even from my students." Maya smiled. "You taught me too," Mrs. Turner blinked. "What did I teach you?" "That adults can change." The teacher smiled back, this time genuinely. Meanwhile, reporters began reaching out to Chuck Norris himself for interviews. He refused most of them. "This isn't about me," he told one producer. "It's about a little girl who reminded people what strength really looks like." But one evening, he did agree to appear on a talk show, only because Maya asked him to. "I just want people to know what really happened," she said. Not the internet version. So the next week they walked onto a national stage together. The host smiled at the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chuck Norris and his daughter Maya." The applause was thunderous. Maya looked a little nervous, but Chuck placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "So, Maya," the host began, "how does it feel to have your story go viral?" Maya giggled. "Weird. I didn't think standing up for myself would be news." The audience laughed warmly. Chuck added, "That's the problem. It shouldn't be news. It should be normal." The host nodded. "Well said. And Chuck, millions of people say you taught the world a lesson without throwing a single punch. What's your message to those watching?" Chuck looked directly into the camera. His voice was calm but strong. "Respect doesn't come from fear. It comes from empathy. Real strength is being kind when you have every reason not to be." The audience erupted in applause, no, not the loud kind, but the meaningful kind that comes from being moved. After the show, back in the car, Maya turned to her dad. "You always know the right thing to say." Chuck laughed. "That's because I've made every wrong choice first." Maya laughed too. "I don't believe that." "You shouldn't," he said, winking. "But your mom would." By the next morning, their interview had gone viral too. Teachers began using the clip in classrooms. Parents shared it with their kids. One comment stood out under the video. "The world needs more Chucks and Mayas. People who stand for kindness even when it's hard." Maya read that comment out loud at breakfast. Smiling, Chuck looked up from his newspaper. "Guess we did all right, huh?" Maya nodded. "Yeah, but it's not just us anymore. It's everyone who watched." He smiled proudly. "Exactly. That's how change starts, one story at a time." A month later, the school held a small event, not for fame, but to celebrate Kindness Week. Students made posters, wrote essays about respect, and even filmed short skits. Maya was asked to give the closing speech. Standing at the podium, she looked out at the crowd, teachers, parents, classmates, and even local officials. Her voice was calm, confident, and clear. "I used to think being strong meant winning fights or proving people wrong, but now I know being strong means being kind when no one's watching. My dad taught me that, and now I hope I can teach it to someone else." The audience rose to their feet, applauding. Mrs. Turner wiped her eyes. Chuck smiled from the back, clapping proudly. As the applause faded, Maya looked up and whispered to herself, "Thanks, Dad." Chuck, hearing her from across the room, nodded slowly, as if saying, "You did it, kid." If you believe kindness is the strongest power in the world, type respect in the comments below and tell us, what country and city are you watching from? Let's see how far this message of respect can travel. It had been nearly 2 months since that unforgettable day at Lincoln Elementary. Yet the world was still talking about it. News anchors replayed the moment Chuck Norris walked into that classroom. Motivational speakers quoted his line, "Kindness is tougher than any punch." And thousands of schools started something called the Maya Challenge, where students shared acts of respect toward classmates and teachers. What had started as a small classroom misunderstanding had now become a global movement. But for Chuck and Maya, life at home hadn't changed much. He still woke her up every morning with a joke. "Rise and shine, champ, the world's waiting for you." She still groaned, pulled the blanket over her head, and said, 5 more minutes. Dad, it was their tradition. One quiet morning, there was a knock on their front door. When Chuck opened it, a sharply dressed man stood there, holding a white envelope embossed with a gold seal. "Mr. Norris," the man said respectfully, "on behalf of the President of the United States, I've been asked to deliver this." Chuck raised an eyebrow. "I didn't break anything, did I?" The man smiled. "Quite the opposite, sir." He handed over the envelope and left. Maya rushed over. "What is it, Dad?" Chuck tore it open, scanned the letter, and then laughed softly. "What does it say?" Maya pressed. He handed it to her. "Mr. Norris, your recent example of compassion and integrity has inspired millions. The White House would be honored to welcome you and your daughter to a special ceremony recognizing your positive influence on young people around the world." Maya's jaw dropped. "The President? Dad, you're being invited to the White House." Chuck grinned. "Correction, we're being invited." A week later, Washington, D.C. buzzed with anticipation. The White House lawn had been prepared for a small but meaningful ceremony. Reporters filled the seats. Cameras rolled. When Chuck and Maya arrived, dressed simply but neatly, the crowd stood and applauded. The president walked up to the podium. "Today," he began, "we honor not just a legend of action, but a man of heart." Chuck Norris showed the world that real heroes don't always throw punches. Sometimes, they simply stand up for what's right, and his daughter, Maya, reminded us all that courage can come in the smallest voices. Maya blushed, glancing at her dad. Chuck placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. The president continued. "For their example of humility, compassion, and moral courage, we present them with the Presidential Medal of Humanity." The audience rose to their feet, clapping thunderously as Chuck and Maya stepped forward. A military officer pinned the medal to Chuck's chest, then handed a smaller version to Maya. For a moment, cameras flashed. People cheered, but Chuck stayed still, humble, his eyes thoughtful. When the applause faded, the president turned to him. "Mr. Norris, would you like to say a few words?" Chuck took the microphone, looked at the crowd, then at Maya. "Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, everyone. I've been honored a lot in my life, in movies, in martial arts, but this one's different because it's not really mine. It belongs to my daughter, and to every kid who ever stood tall when it was easier to stay quiet." He paused, his voice calm but full of conviction. "The world doesn't need more tough guys. It needs more good ones. Strength isn't about fighting harder, it's about caring deeper." The crowd erupted again. Some people wiped their eyes. Even the president nodded, visibly moved. Maya whispered, "You did amazing, Dad." He smiled. "No, we did." That night, as they returned home, Maya looked up at him. "Dad, did you ever think one small moment could change so much?" Chuck chuckled. "Sweetheart, most big things start small. You just have to do the right thing when no one's watching." She thought about that for a moment, then said, "Can I wear my medal to school tomorrow?" He laughed. "You can, but remember, the real medal isn't the one on your neck. It's the respect you earned." The next day at school, Maya walked in proudly, not because she was famous, but because she felt seen. Her classmates greeted her warmly. Even new students whispered her name with admiration. Mrs. Turner hung a banner above the blackboard that read, "Respect is power." At recess, Maya saw a younger boy being teased by some older kids. For a second, she hesitated and then walked right up and said, "Hey, stop that. Everyone deserves respect." The boys looked at her embarrassed. One muttered, "Sorry." The younger kid looked up, grateful. "Thanks," Maya smiled. "No problem. My dad says kindness is a superpower." The boy grinned. "Then you're a superhero." That night, Maya told her dad what happened. Chuck nodded proudly. "See, the world's already changing, one person at a time." Maya hugged him. "I love you, Dad," he smiled. "I love you too, kiddo. You're my greatest victory." The camera of the story pans out. Father and daughter on the porch, the night sky above them, the quiet hum of peace filling the air. One man's humility, one girl's courage, one lesson the world will never forget. If you think respect and kindness can change the world, type "respect" in the comments and tell me, from which country and city are you watching this story? Let's see how far this message can reach. Years passed. Seasons changed. Lincoln Elementary became middle school, then high school. The world kept spinning faster, louder, full of new headlines and fleeting trends. But one story never faded. The day Chuck Norris walked into his daughter's classroom and taught the world what respect really means. Maya grew up in that light, not overshadowed by it, but shaped by it. By the time she turned 18, she wasn't just Chuck Norris's daughter anymore. She was Maya Norris, the girl who taught kindness to millions. At college, she studied education and social psychology. While other students talked about fame and money, Maya talked about empathy, equality, and how a simple act of respect could rewrite a person's life. In her first year, she started a small online campaign called Stand Tall, inspired by her dad's quote. It encouraged students to share stories of courage, moments when they stood up for others, spoke out against bullying, or chose kindness over cruelty. Within a few months, the campaign exploded. Hundreds of thousands of young people joined in. Some shared heartbreaking stories of discrimination or pain, and others shared victories of kindness that restored faith in humanity. Maya was flooded with messages like, "I stood up for my classmate today because of your story. Watched your dad's video and it changed how I treat people. Thank you for reminding me that kindness matters." Each one felt like a small miracle. Meanwhile, back home, Chuck had grown older. His hair was silver now, his steps slower, but his spirit hadn't changed a bit. He still trained every morning, still smiled at strangers, still gave advice like a wise monk wrapped in a cowboy's body. One evening, Maya came home for the weekend. She found him sitting on the porch, sipping tea, watching the sunset. "Hey, old man," she teased. He chuckled. "Watch it, kid. I can still roundhouse kick you into next week." She laughed, sitting beside him. "You know, Dad, that moment years ago when you came to my school, it changed everything." Chuck smiled faintly. "Maybe, but not because of me. Because you listened. Because you stayed kind when others didn't." Maya's eyes softened. "I'm starting to understand what you meant about real strength." He looked at her thoughtfully. "Strength isn't about how many people you can beat. It's about how many you can lift." They sat in silence for a while, the sky painted in orange and gold. Then Maya said quietly, "Dad, you're proud of me, right?" Chuck turned to her, his eyes filled with warmth. "Proud? Maya, I was proud of you before the world even knew your name." A few months later, Maya was invited to deliver a commencement speech at her university graduation. The theme, "What Strength Really Means." As she stood at the podium, hundreds of students and families filled the auditorium. The cameras rolled, broadcasting the ceremony live. She looked down at her notes, then back up, her voice steady and sincere. "When I was a little girl, I told my class that my dad was Chuck Norris." My teacher laughed. Everyone laughed. Until my dad showed up and taught them, and me, in a lesson I'll never forget. He said, "Kindness is tougher than any punch." Back then, I didn't realize how powerful those words were. But now I do, because real power isn't about fear. It's about compassion. It's about seeing someone's worth, even when the world doesn't. The audience was silent. Completely absorbed, Maya continued, her eyes glistening. "My dad always told me, don't try to be the toughest person in the room. Try to be the kindest, because toughness fades, but kindness echoes forever." She looked up toward the crowd and smiled through her tears. "Dad, this one's for you." The audience rose to their feet, clapping thunderously. Back home, Chuck watched the live stream on his old laptop. When Maya said those words, he smiled proudly and whispered to himself, "You did it, kiddo." The next day, Maya received an email from the United Nations Youth Council, inviting her to speak at an international event about compassion in leadership. When she told her dad, he just chuckled. "See, you're officially tougher than me now." She hugged him tight. "Only because you showed me how." That fall, Maya stood in front of leaders, students, and activists from around the world. Flags from every country filled the hall. Her speech was simple but powerful. "You don't need fame or medals to change the world. You just need to care. My father once taught me that being kind isn't weakness, and it's strength in its purest form. And if each of us shows that kind of strength, the world will be a better place." The audience erupted in applause, some even standing to clap. Her dad watched from home once again, this time with tears in his eyes. That night, Maya called him. "Dad, they gave me a standing ovation." He smiled. "I'm not surprised. You've been standing tall since you were 10. Thanks, Dad, for everything." Chuck's voice softened. "You don't have to thank me, Maya. Just promise me one thing." "What's that?" "Keep teaching the world that kindness wins." "I will," she said quietly. And as they said goodnight, both knew something deep. The torch had been passed. The world might remember Chuck Norris as a legend, but it would remember Maya Norris as the legacy of his heart. If you believe kindness is the greatest form of strength, type "kindness wins" in the comments and tell us, which country and city are you watching from? Let's see how far this message of love and respect can travel. Years later, the world had changed again. Technology had advanced. Wars had ended. New generations were born. But through it all, one constant remained. People still spoke about Chuck Norris, not just as the martial arts legend or Hollywood star, but as the man who stood for respect, humility, and love. Maya was now in her 30s, a respected educator, activist, and motivational speaker. Her Our Stand Tall Foundation had grown into a global movement, building schools in underprivileged communities and training teachers to lead with empathy instead of ego. Everywhere she went, people would say, "You're Chuck Norris's daughter? He changed my life." She'd smile softly and reply, "He changed mine first." One quiet morning, Maya got the call she'd always dreaded. Her father, the man who had faced countless enemies on screen, and even more in life, had passed away peacefully in his sleep. He was 85. For a moment, the world went silent. It was as if time itself paused to bow in respect. Social media flooded with tributes. Actors, athletes, fans, soldiers, and ordinary people shared stories about how Chuck had inspired them. Not with his fists, but with his heart. But for Maya, the loss wasn't about a global icon, it was about a father, her first teacher, her best friend, her hero. The funeral was held in Texas, under the same wide blue sky where Chuck had grown up. The air was still, the crowd massive. People came from every corner of the world, from Hollywood to humble villages, to say goodbye to the man who'd shown them what honor truly meant. As Maya stepped to the podium, she looked at her father's photo and that familiar, strong smile that once made the world tremble and now made her heart ache. She took a deep breath, holding back tears. "When I was a little girl," she began, "my teacher laughed when I said my dad was Chuck Norris." Everyone laughed, until he walked in, and in that moment the world learned that kindness and courage go hand in hand. She paused, scanning the faces of thousands gathered there. "My dad taught me that real strength isn't about how hard you can hit. It's about how deeply you can love. He never fought to prove he was better than anyone. He fought to prove that everyone matters." Her voice broke slightly, but she smiled through the tears. "He told me once, 'Maya, the world will remember me for my fights, but I hope you'll remember me for my heart.' Dad, I do." Every single day, the crowd stood in silence, many wiping their eyes. "So today," Maya continued, "I don't say goodbye, because people like him never really leave. His lessons live in every person who chooses compassion over cruelty. His spirit lives in every act of kindness that starts small and spreads like light." She stepped down, laid her hand gently on her father's casket, and whispered, "I'll keep teaching them, Dad, just like you taught me." Months later, Maya released a short video titled "The Final Lesson." It showed old clips of Chuck Norris, training, laughing, hugging fans, and speaking about life. The last scene faded to his quote, "Be the reason someone believes in good again." The video went viral overnight. Hundreds of millions watched. People from every race, religion, and nation commented, "Thank you, Chuck. You'll always be our hero. Kindness wins." And somewhere beyond this world, perhaps sitting on a golden porch in the sky, Chuck Norris smiled that same calm smile, because he knew his mission was complete. His daughter carried his torch, and the world finally understood his greatest truth. Strength may fade, fame may end, but kindness, that lives forever. If you believe legends never die, that love and kindness outlive us all, type "Legacy lives on" in the comments and tell us, which country and city are you watching this from? Let's show how far Chuck Norris's message of respect has reached.